So Ernesto Izquierdo is the Global Community Manager and is also a change advisor at the International Committee of the Red Cross. David Drodge, that just joined us, is a group lead digital at Roche, and Philippa Anderson is the organizational change lead for digital transformation at Lamb Weston Meijer. Welcome to you three. We are going to spend the 50 minutes with you three. It's a panel discussion. It's about how do we embrace digital and using apps, the digital signage, social channels for employee engagement. So we are still in the same, and we continue our journey on those elements. Let me introduce Philippa first. So Philippa started a career at Nestlé. Then she worked for RHM, which is the one of the biggest food manufacturers in the UK, and then moved to Tesco. She's a very experienced strategic leader in of large-scale multifunctional programs, change management initiatives, and digital transformation. She works with very large programs where lots of people are involved, not at the same place. So how do you manage this internal communication with people who are not at the same place at the same time? That's a job. And Ernesto Izquierdo is the Global Community Manager, and as I said, he's also a change advisor in the International Committee of the Red Cross. He was born and raised in Mexico, and then he has worked on community, collective intelligence, and projects at the European Commission. He joined the Red Cross in 2013, if I'm right, and since then he has led the implementation and development of its the social network, enterprise social network. He works with a lot of leaders, almost 200 community leaders, and it's very at the international of intersection, of internal communication, information management, innovation, change management, of course, learning and development, he's involved also in a study called Engage. At the Red Cross, and David Drodge is he works at Roche today, and is the group lead digital. He's been working for 25 years in several countries, so it's very international. The cultural aspects of communication, he's going to also, I think, going to talk a little bit about that. What he's doing is really tries, and not more. Is more than trying. He's combining mind and machine. And that's why because that helps us to drive better decision making, and it's of course engage more people and more engaged people into new things. He's passionate about digital and how digital can change the world in where we live. So dear guests, dear speakers, you've got the floor for the coming 50 minutes. And well,
excellent. Thank you, Liz, for the presentation.
You're welcome.
We had a little chat beforehand in preparing this, and we thought let's start with defining what we understand by employee engagement before we dive into how do we increase employee engagement with digital channels. So what I propose is that I'll present how we're defining employee engagement at the ICRC. This is our definition. We'll share 14 drivers of employee engagement that we're measuring through an annual survey, and then the 6 of them that we can impact through digital employee engagement. And then David and Philippa will, I would say, jump in and challenge us, and also David will present how they're doing it on one of these drivers, and Philippa might also share as well some of what they're doing with regards to one of these drivers. So if that's worked for everyone, let's just get started. So I'll just share quickly our definition of employee engagement, And you should be able to see, one sec, just presenting, turning to presenter, voila, and there we go. So screen one, beautiful. So this is the definition we have at the ICRC. It's not for ours, it's from a benchmarking company. It's employee engagement is an outcome of the relationship between the organization and its employees. An engaged employee is fully absorbed and enthusiastic about their work with a high level of commitment to the organization and its goals. So this is our definition of employee engagement, and how do we make that more concrete? So how do we make that more concrete? They have identified 14 drivers of employee engagement. They're here on the left: environment, peer relationships, recognition, growth, strategy, workload, and the list goes on. Out of these 14 drivers, we have identified that with digital tools, we can impact at least on 6 of them. The others, there might be a little impact, but it's a lot tougher for us as a digital workplace team to map it and say, this is what we can provide. So if we go just into one of these environment, your physical, they didn't put digital, we now put it with COVID, the digital workplace positively affects the ability to do your job. Well, how can we improve that with easier task management, working globally with colleagues, less emails, and so on. I'll just share one second one, peer relationships, and I'll just move to the next one. So peer relationships. You can trust and effectively collaborate with your colleagues. Well, how do you build trust in today's world? Well, since we're working each one of us on their own homes, we can build trust through digital proximity. And this is what we're having today, like a call, a webinar, regular chat ups, and improving trust speeds collaboration. And so what we're trying to achieve is help the organization, as what was David mentioning, we're trying to make better decision making, and we can better decision making with higher trust and faster collaboration. So where we are today at the ICRC, we have just identified these areas. This project Engage is aiming at improving these 6 areas of work over the next year and a half. So we have identified the behaviors we want to see. We're now identifying what are the tools that will enable such behaviors. One example, in MS Teams, you have a live event, people cannot reply to one another. Well, we need people to reply to one another. What is the tool that will enable that? We have seen that Yammer enables this, so we'll dive into that probably, and there are other tools in the market. Then we need to identify the change of management culture and mindset that fosters such behaviors. Some people need to reply in anonymous ways, so we need to enable that for them to feel safe and get the feedback we want. Otherwise, people will just shut up and don't say anything. And finally, we need to identify what are the KPIs that enable us to track progress, measure against, and implement change management strategy. So I think there's where Philippa will come in also and share some of her insights on how they're measuring organizational change, how they're powering this. So I'll just stop there. This is just like the framework where we are, and I would say let's give the floor to David and Philippa. David might share one of the examples how they're using this in the organization at Roche, and Philippa as well. So I'll just stop sharing and eager to hear, I would say, your challenges, how you're doing it. Please comment on the chat with things that you might say, I didn't get this. Yeah, we're here to have an exchange. The floor is yours, David and Philippa.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Ernesto. So basically, one of the challenges that we have is around peer relationships. How do we relate to each other? And it's funny because Roche is very much a people-oriented business, but it's something when you're almost 100,000 employees that becomes tricky. So lots of coffees, lots of teas in certain countries. And basically, if we look at that kind of relationship, you know, sometimes you're talking to someone in the organization and they go, oh, right. You know, like, for instance, you know, I've got this issue or whatever else. And they say, oh, you should go talk to this person. And then that person goes, oh, I should talk to that person. Before you know it, you've actually probably had 5 or 6 conversations, coffee, tea, whatever. And it sometimes kind of goes up the organization as well and over. So it goes over from one manager to manager and back down again. And then finally you get to the right person. And that was a big challenge for us. And one of the ways we looked at that actually was trying to figure out how do we get this knowledge that we have in our heads into a system that could help us actually to make those connections better. And therefore, part of that, you know, getting to better decision making. So basically what we did was that, like Ernesto, actually, we actually use a software called StarMind. And what we did actually in ours is that we use, for our internal social media network, it's actually Google Currents. So unfortunately, there's no exchange between the two systems. So we had to build a scraper to get the information out. We had to ask people when they signed up to StarMind to give us permission to use that information, and then categorize it so that we actually create an automatic profile of a person. So for instance, my personal interest is around things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the like, and how we can actually engage with our customers and our internal stakeholders better. And that profile would then be in the system. So what happens then when someone actually goes into the system and has a question about one of those topics, it would produce me as one of those experts. I can decide if I want to actually comment on that. And once that's actually facilitated is that we see that not only the tool itself is great and a lot of good conversations happen in there, but it actually enables people to get onboarded so much quicker. And we actually benchmarked this with one of our competitors here in Switzerland, and our uptake rate was about 4 times as fast because we implemented this system and we went this way. And the system itself has great stats. It's like, for instance, answering questions within 2 hours, doubling the amount of questions that get answered. Satisfaction rates are almost like 5 out of 5. So it's something where we see along a different metrics, it works really, really well. But again, it's back to people. It's like, for instance, the machine is actually there to help us to have better relationships, to do our jobs better, and to foster this transparency and that we want to have within our organizations.
Thanks, David. Thanks for this. I would say that connecting, integrating two systems to make it work for the organization. I think it's a key element. Philippa, do you have any I would say examples from your organization that you're working on or have shared in the past couple of worked on past couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the key things that we have struggled with is that a majority of our workforce are not desk sitters, I guess the word is. And on top of that, David, I share a passion with you, and international communication is also one of our things. So we're a global organization, and a majority of those people don't sit behind a desk. So that has been a struggle to communicate with people because they don't have email addresses, they don't have a laptop or a desktop sat in front of them, and so that is a huge portion of the workforce. And I can't remember the actual statistics, but I think just globally something like 80% of workers are not these desk sitters. So that is a huge majority of people that we're talking about. And I think there was some research done not that long ago that said that over half of these non-desk sitters are not feeling loved by their organization. And by not feeling loved, essentially that amounts to we're not engaging them through communication. We're not recognizing them through communication. We're not speaking to them in their language or even sometimes about their area of work. So it might be that things are very focused on a corporate level, but maybe not talking about the wider business. So that was where we've kind of been coming from. And I'd say one of the main challenges we faced. And so one of the key things that we've tried to do there is very simple steps, but just the use of apps, pure and simple. So we found that nearly all of our employees have smartphones now. It might not be work issued, but they were still using various apps like, say, WhatsApp for business. They were texting their business partners, kind of, I don't know, sort of 4, 5, 6 times a day sometimes. So they were still using apps to communicate with each other, but outside of sort of an official or collaborative channel. So they were just engaging more on a one-to-one or maybe small group level, but they weren't moving outside of their very small sphere. So that was kind of the first thing that we've looked at, was just having a sort of social media app tool and just something like Jabber that you were talking about there. And it's for the whole business. And I think that was something that's really important, is to make sure that it is inclusive across everywhere, so that everyone can participate and that the discussion involves all of them. And I think the second thing that we made sure that we did was we found that the most successful sort of employee engagement is kind of 10 to 15, even 20 pieces of shareable content every week. And that would then span the various parts of the business. So it's not always about a product launch. It's not always about, oh, look what this sales guy achieved. Isn't that amazing? Because that's where we came from.
Okay.
So now it's very much talking about what people are doing almost in their everyday roles. It's not always the big successes. It's about what's going on, what are you doing? And we found that, starting out, it took a while to get more and more people to join in. It didn't just sort of overnight, everyone started engaging and using the tools. But slowly over time, if you keep producing that content, and again, I think the very big focus is that a lot of that content is not, how to say, corporate generated, it's user generated content, and it's relevant content, and it's inclusive content. So those things slowly but surely sort of get more and more people engaged, and we have very, very high sort of participation and engagement rates now versus where we started. Still a way to go. So I'd say I think it's sort of say 80% now, but hey, on our way to 100. And so I think for us, this was one of the main challenges, and very simple solution was just everyone's familiar with social media. Everyone has a phone. Let's get an app. Let's get social.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I don't know for you, David, and thanks, Philippa, for sharing this process on making it as inclusive as possible. I would say for us at the ICRC, we have a tougher challenge because around 30% of our colleagues don't have an ID. They don't have an email. They are drivers. They are working in a factory developing prosthetics, and even providing just the license costs of I would say a Yammer account. It's a budget. When you multiply that by 6,000 for an organization that is nonprofit, it's quite a budget. So we have some challenges in terms of aid. Sometimes they don't have a smartphone. So just giving them Yammer, well, like, what do I do? I have a Nokia. So we have I would say another level of a challenge is how do we enable some of our colleagues to be able to access our communication tools in their language. They speak Farsi. It's not English, it's not French, it's not Spanish, it's Farsi. So how do we enable them to create content in their own language in an app or in a device that is accessible for them? In some other countries where it's completely effective, and a cell phone might mean the cost of a wage of a monthly wage. So just having it and going around in the street, it's a risk. So what happens if you lose it? Who pays for it? Who pays for the insurance? So there are many questions for us, at least, in terms of how do we enable the full totality of our workplace to engage on this. So I'm not sure if you have solved some of that, David. If you have, probably you don't have the same use case or the same challenge, but I'm curious to hear how you're solving that.
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's a case that I think that, and it's not mine, but it's something where it came from kind of a similar discussion once before, and people were saying basically that, now that most of us are working from home, it's a case like, for instance, we've gone from being in the chicken coop to kind of free-range chickens, and it's the case that even if we're actually in that situation where we would normally be at an office, or we have a computer, or we have a smartphone, it's still something where we have that more of a challenge of like people working kind of completely different hours because of where they're decided to kind of stay during the pandemic and things like this as well. So I think definitely it's changed a lot of the issues of actually how we normally would do things, like digital signage. Obviously nothing right now. I mean, it's a case that, and so that we've really had to kind of pump up the digital side of our interactions. And I think, like both of you mentioned, it's something where we also kind of default through to some of the common platforms that are already out there. Why develop something new if people are already somewhere else? So for us, it was Google Currents, but there's quite a few informal WhatsApp groups kicking around as well.
Yeah, we have, I would say, the same. I would say, just also linking back to the presentation beforehand, we have a plethora of tools in different countries. Some countries use Viber, some others use WhatsApp, some others use Signal. So how do we enable these different countries and with their colleagues, with their partners, to really tough challenge to enable them to work with partners? You cannot tell them, hey, everyone has to use Signal. Well, the partner might be using Viber. How do you impose on your partner to reach out? So it's a tricky and long, I would say, long process. We'll need to have a different policies that enable the use of different tools for each country in different ways. I have a question around, this is also going back to the thinking of the engagement. How are you supporting this enabling work? We want employees to be engaged. How do you support them? What are your change management strategies around it? What are the support groups you set out that you have created? What's your how to say that, your setup to enable this employee engagement or increase employee engagement?
Yeah, so from our side on this, pretty standard one to get them to start using the new tools is to find those kind of first starters, those first movers. They have many names. You can call them change champions. You can call them, change cheerleaders. I've heard a million different terms, but ultimately they're the first movers. So they're the ones who are queuing outside of the Apple store before the new phone is released. They're the people who adapt and adopt to new things very quickly. And so we know who those people are. And just opening up a new sort of method of communication automatically identifies who those are. So you could see who started posting kind of pretty quick. You could see who, and then those are the people that we then talk to more. Those are the people who we use to essentially help us provide more content, help us to be more engaging, and help us understand what content it is that people are wanting to hear. And I think I saw a message there from Harrow about, in his experience on the site, personal stories, profiles of colleagues published are their most sort of popular content. And so it's exactly that. It's finding what are the most popular pieces of content and using these people who like to engage straight away, who jump on and want to create this, use them and their skills to then focus on those. So say if at ours it is about profiles, okay, I'm going to interview every single one of those people and have them kind of posting profiles about themselves, or interviewing each other, posting interviews of each other. So it's about enabling them by focusing on what seems to be working, and then who seems to already be running with the ball, and then try and bring those two together. Because there's no point in trying to invent different things and think of different things when you already know what works and what people are looking at and reading.
Yeah. Thank you, Philippa. How would you, David?
Yeah, I think that that's a great point. I mean, if you look back to this example that I used with the social network, actually you did see those super participants there. They were very much kind of promoting their work and everything else. And one of the nice things off is when we actually moved this into the StarMind tool and actually use that as a kind of the Q&A part, we also start to see some of the people that don't necessarily put themselves out there. So it's a case that they are innovative, they're happy to share, but some of them just don't want to actually kind of put their hand up or whatever else. So one nice thing about that tool is that the questioning part of it is anonymous. And then, like for instance, therefore you get more of those quiet voices and top of the noisier ones. So it's a good mix there. But again, getting the super participants motivated, giving them what they need and what kind of rewards they want is super to actually to kind of energize the network. And then you really get more and more people going, okay, that's the place that I need to be. And that's where I'm going to communicate, or in my case, ask questions and get answers.
Excellent. Thanks for that. For us, what we've been doing is we have mapped with the statistics of StarMind, and also another tool we have, Jive, is who are these community leaders. And then we organize monthly catch-ups with them, like coffees, informal coffees, to share with them what's in the making, and we hear their needs, their requests, like enablement sessions. And then sometimes one colleague will come and say, "Hey, I have this problem with my community. How can I make it up better?" And I'm like, I'm not going to answer to you directly. Let's invite the other community managers. Let's have a session. Let's have a deep dive on your community, and we improve with all their feedback. And it obviously comes out as a more robust community, and all the others get the insight from everyone. So we're trying to turn from one-to-one support to, I would say, peer support groups in a regular session. The other thing we've done with Sarman, we were at 91% of questions solved, just leaving the network alone. I stepped out. People were saying, yeah, it works because you're handling. I was like, okay, I'm going to take a couple of months, and it was actually more like 6 months. I'm not going to answer any more questions. I just let the network flow. And we were at 91% of questions solved. And so it was, we have a backlog of questions unanswered. So I just send an email to everyone. I identified our 250 most active users and say, hey, thank you very much for making our organization more agile. We know that we're solving questions really fast. Let's get rid of this backlog. Let's clean this up. And so we did this in January, and we just hang out for 1 hour the first time. And I said, in 1 hour, we have 100 questions unsolved. I'm pretty sure that in 1 hour, if we're 30, 50, we'll solve it in 30 minutes. Actually, we solved them in like 45 minutes. There was at the end just 5 or 6 questions that were tricky. But since we had many people from all over the organization, if they didn't know the answer, they would point to the person, and they would invite the other experts who were not yet in the system. So we were bringing out. So we do that every quarter, more or less, as a way of cleaning up and re-engage, and it's fun. We put some music at the beginning. We bring in some good energy, good vibes, and people come in, and you see their heads of division, heads of unit, like quite some senior people coming in because it's fun, because they know they're helping the organization move faster. And so yeah, it's a fun event for us. So that's I would say one of the examples that we're using. And finally, the other one that I just saw from GRDF, it's a French company. They have a really robust setup, and they do a weekly support session. It's just everyone knows that every week there's a training, so you just jump in and learn on that, and then they can request specific training, and then they get a specific training for one person or a team. And I found it really interesting to have a regular rhythm in the support you do, and the adoption obviously goes higher and higher. And obviously having a network of champions spread out locally, so they have a central team and local teams that relay, and they're training them on a regular basis through Yammer groups. So like there's a website for users, they can find information, the trainings, the webinars, and then they have peer-to-peer support groups for each tool. So you have one for Teams, you have one for, I'm saying nonsense, Outlook, so they have different peer support groups, and I found it really robust in terms of a change management support model. And I wanted just to share that as a good example. Elise, you come back on
Yeah,
online.
I came back because we got less than 5 minutes to go, and we got some questions.
Okay.
So one first for you, Izquierdo, it was about the order of importance of the drivers you shown us at the beginning. Was it all the drivers you've shown? Are they in the order of importance, or there's no?
No. What we put them in terms of the 6 at the top and out of the 14 is these are the 6 where we, the digital workplace team, can see we can have an impact on. If we improve these areas, we can do something about it, and we could measure it. For the others, we can't, because one of them is management support. I cannot influence how David is supporting his employees. That's from the digital workplace teams. There's nothing I can do about it. I might be able to shift a little bit with giving some training on people management, but it's not my role. It's HR role to develop people management skills. So that's why we just put 6 out of them on the top. Those are the ones we can focus on, and we'll leave the others to HR and management.
Yeah. Anna Perini is very well. She likes your answer because we can measure, she said.
Yeah.
But it's true that without measuring things, it's the proof is not there. So what you discussed about was really interesting. You said, well, we need to connect people to people. We need to connect people to content. And there are several questions about this. As people are not all the same, and especially because some are managers, some are not managers, whatever. How do we manage to not giving all the same contact to all the same people? Say it's a large question, trying to gather several questions. So
I have one, I would say one easy answer is using the Active Directory. So you have groups in your Active Directory. These are managers, these are this division, this is that region. And so you can target your messages. I know in Yammer, you can link those so that whenever something is created for this community, it's sent to them by email. So every night they get an email saying, this is the recap of what's been going on in your division. I think other tools enable such things. So you can target some of your messages or your stories to specific groups so that it's relevant. And I'm not seeing something happening in Kinshasa if I'm in Geneva, and I have nothing to do right now with that team. But in another way, it could be open in a community so that I could see it because it is an open one. So there are some tech ways that facilitate this for the users. You just need to find it out and link them to your systems. That's our answer. Probably Philippa and David have another one.
I think, well, ours is very similar as well. You know, we do have the groups, like you say, so digitally it can kind of separate the messaging. But what I would add is that we very much try to actually keep the messaging the same where we can. So we try very hard to not separate. Now, obviously, there are messages and things that will need to be management only, and you know, when that is the case, then yes, that's what we keep to. But with regards to everything else, and certainly the building of communities and the connection of people to people, we actually try to have the same content and it's shared with everybody. So it doesn't matter what level of the business you're in or what division of the business you're in. It's about learning from each other and understanding the business as a whole. And it's, yeah, we try not to separate unless there are obviously strategic or business reasons why we need to do that.
Okay.
I would just add there quickly that, but one of the things that we did have seen is that, you know, Roche is a very decentralized organization, but it does actually help to have the leadership involved, the leadership pushing the same messages, the leaders actually say, hey, I'm using this tool and I found this to be super useful. And, you know, again, you look at those influencers, it's great to have that top-down support as well, even though it maybe doesn't feel natural to the organization or whatever else. Best to have it coming from the top and the bottom.
Yep.
Okay, good. Well, so this session is ending. Thank you very much for your participation. It was really interesting.